Hello ladies and gents, welcome to Reacts, and this is Why Are There No Bridges in East London by the channel Jay Foreman. Yes, another Jay Foreman video. It's been a while since I did one of those. I think I did quite a few, 6-7 videos already. They also have one running series. If I remember, I don't remember the name of it, but they talk about basically places around London or something like that, right? Remember that weird road line thing for bicycle? That was the last video I did. I don't know. So yeah, why are there no bridges in East London? You're talking about the river bridges, or any bridges, I guess. What, Thames, or there is no river there or something? Yeah, I'm sure this is going to be interesting video if Jay Foreman is covering it. I love this channel. They talk about some weird things around the world, mostly London, but they also talk about something like there is a place in Egypt or somewhere. I'm pretty sure I saw the video from Jay Foreman about that, Mapman or something, where they talk about how there is no owner of that, right? Because no country wants to claim it, so somebody just came there, put a flag there and claimed it for them or something. But yeah, let's watch it. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like, subscribe, so I know which type of videos to react to more, which type of channels to react to more. Check out the reaction, there's a link in the description, and yeah, let's watch it.
In West London, you're spoilt for choice for ways to cross the River Thames.
But in East London, the Thames is your wet nemesis.
Oh, there is.
Your only options to cross are queue for ages for the Blackwall Tunnel, go the huge long way round and pay the toll for the Dartford crossing, or get seasick on the so slow it's literally never worth it Woolwich ferry.
Oh, wait a minute. So Thames obviously goes through East. I didn't know that. I don't know how apparently it goes through the entire East and West London. So why wouldn't you build a bridge there? I mean, is there some kind of a historic? I know London, there are way too many historical places that they protect or really protect, right? The fine is ridiculous if you won't do any damage there, if I remember correctly. I saw that in Top Gear or something, right? So I guess there could be something in the way like that. I don't know.
This gives poor East London quite the disadvantage.
Despite the very short distance as the crow flies, if you live here, it's very unlikely you go to work or school or do your shopping or visit friends here, unless you're a crow.
Greater London effectively operates like a Pac-Man with a wacka-wacka wide gap between these isolated communities.
So how did London end up so unfairly asymmetrical? In other words, why is West London better than East London? Dun 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 dun.
Oh, it is there. Unfinished London. Yeah, that's the
there are
series.
3 reasons why it's easier to build bridges in West London than East London.
1. Geography. In the west, the River Thames is a narrow, squiggly trickle where bridge building is easy. But by the time it gets to London Bridge, it becomes a wide, majestic estuary with massive tides and marshy floodplains. Lest we forget, the Romans built London Bridge where they did, specifically because it was the widest place they could build it. 2. Shipping. In the late 19th century, when London did most of its growing, it was the biggest shipping port in the world, making bridge building east of the ports practically impossible.
The literally only bridge in East-ish London, Tower Bridge, was an incredible feat of construction. So impressive it merited its own episode. Its elaborate brute force engineering and massive cost were justified by its iconic location, a huge gateway to the heart of London for those arriving by boat.
If they wanted to build any more...
Oh yeah, I remember that from the game Syndicate, Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Yeah, I remember that. Like, obviously River Thames is a big part of the game, and I realized that, okay, Tower Bridge is the last bridge. I once, because the boat, there is a constant boat flow there. Apparently it's part of the, CPU thing, whatever. They generate constantly, boats constantly, and there are missions there. I realized, like, holy shit, look at that. This is the last bridge. And then I realized that this is the bridge. I guess it could be something like a welcome thing, because it's an iconic bridge.
More bridges in East London, every one of them would have to be bigger or more complicated than Tower Bridge. And that wasn't going to happen because 3. No demand.
Historically, East London has always been poorer and more sparsely populated than West London, with no rich people to pay tolls and no important people to complain. So not only was it more effort to build crossings here, it wasn't worth the effort. However, that all started to change at the end of the 19th century.
In the decades since the disastrous Thames Tunnel, the Victorians had learnt some lessons and had become rather good at digging.
Having figured out how to build miles of railways underground, all they had to do was exactly the same thing under the river.
So at the end of the 19th century, using the same technology as the Tube, London got its very first road tunnels, one at Blackwall and one at Rotherhithe.
With demand still rising and East London's population still growing, these should have been the start of a tunnel revolution spreading eastwards along the Thames throughout the 20th century. So why didn't that happen? It's a story that's been told so many times I'm getting bored of it now. Basically, the war.
First the First World War and second the Second World War put a stop to all big public projects. And when the wars were over, the money had run out, and it never really came back.
And so, the 20th century saw pretty much no new river crossings in London.
Apart from the Greenwich and Woolwich foot tunnels, which don't really count.
I mean, after the wars, basically, only country left with a real advantage, economical advantage, was United States. Most of the giant powers of Europe was kind of drained after that.
They're just foot tunnels. Chiswick and Twickenham bridges, both part of the same road, opened on the same day in 1933. A second Blackwall tunnel, which doesn't really count because it's just a widening of the first, and the Dartford tunnel, which became two Dartford tunnels, which became two Dartford tunnels, and the QE2 bridge, which also doesn't really count because it's in not London. London found itself frozen in this asymmetrical state for more than a century. This asymmetry gives the river a completely different character depending which side of London you're on. In the west, the river brings prosperity and flats with views and gastropubs and university boat races. But in the east, the river brings...
By the end of the 20th century, the shipping industry that prevented any crossings being built here in the first place had all but disappeared, leaving behind a string of post-industrial literal dead ends, largely untouched by regeneration or your thoughts.
Whoa.
The exception that proves the rule is Canary Wharf, which since the 80s has seen a rebirth as a business district full of
Has no one ever thought to try to do anything to fix this? Yes, they have, ages ago.
In the 1970s, plans were afoot for a long-awaited pill to close Pac-Man's mouth, the boringly named the East London River Crossing.
By this time, technology had moved on, and bridges had once again overtaken tunnels as the more cost-effective way to get cars across a river.
The bridge formed part of the notorious plans for new motorways in London called ringways.
On the north side, the roads were more than ready for the arrival of the new bridge.
You can clearly see on satellite view how the North Circular Road gapes expectantly open wide, ready to send and receive cross-river traffic. But on the south side, it's not clear at all where the traffic was meant to go. The new bridge would have necessitated the construction of a huge 8-lane motorway, bulldozing hundreds of households out of the way.
The people of Plumstead were understandably unhappy when the bridge got approval in 1985, but their bacon was rescued by an unlikely saviour.
2 years later, in 1987, the government accidentally built an international airport right next door to the site of the new bridge, which added a maximum height restriction on top of the already restrictive minimum height restriction.
With the bridge needing a complete redesign, that meant going through the approval process.
One thing's for damn sure. Basically, governments and local municipalities, whatever, they have to fight certain areas of your city because everybody basically, everybody's their own thing, right? So this side wants bridge, this side does not. So they're let's build a fucking airport there. So there is no bridge. They have to go turn around and do all that shit.
That's all over again. And this time it failed, and all thoughts of a crossing here were abandoned in 1993. But not for long.
In 2004, the Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, proposed an upgrade, or downgrade depending how you look at it, on the same site, the slightly betterly named Thames Gateway Bridge.
Ken's bridge was going to be a local bridge for local people.
There would be just 4 lanes instead of 8, 2 of which would be bus lanes, which had the potential of being turned into an extension for the DLR.
You can see on satellite view that Ken's bridge got quite far in the planning stages too.
Just north of Galleon's Reach, there's a wide concrete flyover that stops mid-air where the connection to his new bridge was going to be.
Environmentally speaking, it was a massive improvement on the monster from the 70s, but there was a major flaw in Ken's concept.
A local bridge for local people was a very naive and completely impossible thing to enforce.
I'm free to miss one. Go away.
Ken's bridge could only have been local if it were one of many crossings in East London, so that travellers had lots of options, just like how it is in West London. But with East London so far behind, the Thames Gateway Bridge on its own would unavoidably have drawn cars and lorries from all over London, congesting and polluting the narrow residential streets of Plumstead, which in many ways is worse than building a motorway through it.
The Thames Gateway Bridge was indeed designed to be joined later by the Belvedere Bridge and Silvertown Tunnel, but the locals knew that these complementary crossings wouldn't realistically have come to the rescue for decades, if they ever came at all.
Ooh.
For that reason, the Thames Gateway Bridge was viewed as a cause of congestion. And for that reason, it had almost no support politically or locally. And for that reason, when the next Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, came along, he took the popular and simple decision to scrap it. It was a rather odd...
And knowing Boris, he did that the same way. He kicked the plans. All right. I mean, you can kind of see why basically people like after all the, I mean, when London was kind of, growing slowly, the bridges came and everybody was fine. But London is already there, right? It's a, mega city like that. It's already there. And then you basically said that this whole area doesn't have any bridges. Let's just build one bridge there. Of course, people are going to be pissed off. Like, are you kidding me? The level of traffic would be ridiculous.
Odd move for Boris, a man so famously fond of bridges. Perhaps he just didn't like it because it wasn't his idea.
It's harder than ever to get big projects like bridges funded by the government and/or approved by the locals. That's why all the bridges built this century have been quite a pedestrian affair. So far, we've had the Millennium Bridge, which when first opened struggled to take the weight of pedestrians, and the Emirates Airline, an expensive over-branded cable car/tourist non-attraction connecting nowhere to nowhere else, inexplicably featured on the tube map despite a grand total of regular users of 4.
A few more pedestrian-only bridges have also been planned and not built.
At Canary Wharf, Wandsworth, Pimlico, and most high-profile of all, the profoundly unnecessary Garden Bridge, intended more for private parties and selfies than for travel, which cost £53 million just to cancel.
But these are tourist attractions at best and vanity projects at worst.
All those bridges didn't happen, and they thought, let's just build a pedestrian bridge where there are gardens and shit. Yeah, that's gonna happen.
And they're all in central London. They do nothing to address the fundamental packmanity of Greater London and are quite insulting to East Londoners. So now, 15 years after the Thames Gateway Bridge was cancelled, what's been put on the table to address this? The worst crossing ever proposed.
Right next door to the Blackwall Tunnel, but at a jaunty angle, is the very controversially proposed Silvertown Tunnel.
It's a very odd choice of location, given that it's one of the few parts of East London that already has lots of river crossings, and it's an even odder choice of mode. The Silvertown Tunnel is for motor traffic only, with no pedestrians, cyclists or trains allowed. Its purpose is to reduce traffic in the Blackwall Tunnel, which we really should have learnt by now, in real life will encourage more car journeys than before and create more congestion in the whole Blackwall area.
Public opinion is more anti-car than ever, which is why there's a massive campaign against the Silvertown Tunnel. And as for whether it'll ever be built, I don't know.
It's a paradox. East London desperately needs connections, but East London desperately also needs not to be ruined by pollution and congestion. So what on earth could be the solution? There's actually a rather brilliant one.
The two as
say no to car shit if this is about the global warming. I mean, electric cars are becoming a regular thing. Sooner or later, they will become a regular thing. So it's not much of pollution then. So tunnels would work for electric cars too. A congestion thing, I can understand that. But basically, they have to create some kind of 3-4 major project, whether tunnels or bridges. Otherwise, local people will be pissed off. Because who wants that, right? All the fucking congestion in one place.
yet unconnected East Londons are a great opportunity to create ambitious new non-car crossings for rail, trams, cycling and walking.
Ignoring today's demand for new roads and instead providing for journeys that don't exist yet may seem daft and will certainly cause frustration for the first few years, but when the only option to cross is a clean, green, sustainable one, people will take the clean, green, sustainable one in their thousands, and the positive effect will spread well beyond the banks of this river. For proof of how brilliantly this phenomenon works, come with me now to West London.
I don't know.
In 2019, nasty cracks were found in the pedestals of Hammersmith Bridge, and the local council abruptly closed it to all traffic after 132 years of service.
Understandably, many local drivers complained, saying it would cause traffic jams, and it did at first, but then an interesting thing happened.
When Hammersmith Bridge reopened in 2021, it assumed a new role as a quiet, pleasant and safe pedestrian and cycle bridge, which has encouraged more journeys by foot and by bike, reducing car journeys and traffic not just in Hammersmith but across West London.
What Hammersmith shows us is that what we choose to build, or indeed choose to don't build, affects how we choose or don't choose to travel, and that's the way round it should be. The tide is shifting, pun massively intended, in the right direction, away from cars.
The proposed Lower Thames crossing, a scheme to fight cars with cars to try to take traffic out of the Dartford Tunnel, has been roundly rejected by locals.
There's actually been rather a lot of progress for trains lately.
No fewer than 7 new rail crossings have appeared across the Thames in the last 25 years, and there are even more proposed for the future. There's a potential rail link to Thamesmead from the DLR or overground, but probably not both. There's the Kennex Tram, a planned tram network around the riverside commuter towns in Kent and Essex linked by a tunnel, which is too far outside London to be taken seriously. And of course the Elizabeth line is going to open, tomorrow. Well, it took 3 videos, but that's pretty much the whole history of the River Thames and how Londoners have crossed it, from the Romans to the present day.
I find it fascinating how much London's relationship with its river has changed over its long history. It's actually quite sad to think that what started out as a major highway and the lifeblood of London, saturated with boats of all different shapes and sizes, now spends most of its time sitting uselessly empty. A physical and mental barrier between North and South London.
It's not really sad. It's the technology evolved. Now there are basically massive trains and planes. Why would you use a river like that? But okay, first of all, I'm surprised that when they closed bridges, people actually started to use cycling more. It's just like, oh fine, there's no bridges, I'm not going to drive a car. That is surprising to me. It's good actually. Overall, basically, people are more healthier because they bicycle. But I don't know, man. Saying that there will be no car and people will just ride bicycles just feels weird. Like, I don't know, electric vehicles, hydrogen cars of the future. I mean, cars don't necessarily have to pollute, right? So saying cars is just problem all around, all the way to the end, and you just have to ride bicycle kind of feels primitive. Like, come on, man, that's not really, I mean, you're gonna ride bicycle all around the London is not really small, and yes, some of the people can do, but it's just weird for asking everybody to do that. So I don't know if everybody's just gonna ride bicycles and it's gonna be more greener. Electric cars are getting greener and greener, not just because of the they use they use less fuel. Not just that, they're more efficient. I don't know how to explain this. Like, 1 liter of petrol can travel a certain distance. If you use that same level of 1 liter of petrol and basically pollution from that, and use that as an electric way, that car will travel much faster, and on top of that, it also is much more economical on top of that. So cars are much more less greenhouse issue nowadays because of the electric cars. Obviously, electric cars is not the global thing yet, but it's rapidly increasing. Even in India, I can see things like electric cars, electric mopeds are a thing. I see it a lot, right? Even the affordable cars are becoming electric now. So electric will become a thing, and it doesn't necessarily have to vilify the cars.
But will this trend, like so many others in London's evolving infrastructure, shift back the other way? Are there ways we could put our river to better use?
The Thames Clippers are starting to transform from an expensive novelty tourist attraction into a reliable commuter service. Maybe they have a future as a no-nonsense integrated part of the city's transport network, like how it is in Sydney, or Brisbane, or Copenhagen, or San Francisco, or Zurich, or Hong Kong, or Amsterdam. Or maybe they'll go completely the other way and drain the River Thames and turn it into a park. It's not that far-fetched an idea. It's exactly what they did to the River Turia in Valencia in 1969, making the city safer from flooding and opening up acres of new green space.
What future technologies lie ahead in the next 1,000 years that could see our river once again becoming a major useful highway? The answer is coming in part 4.
Look, man, London, obviously England overall was the global power at one point, and one of the prime point of that was Thames River because of all the business. We think of Industrial Revolution and London and all those fucking factories. We think of Thames River too because of that was the mode of transport at the time. So Thames is such an iconic place. I don't think they'll ever drain it, but yeah, who knows?
You know, I remember the first time my grandfather gave me Surfshark VPN. In those days, it came in a paper wrapper and had this horrible bitter taste. But it was worth it for the wonderful extra online security and ability to access content from around the world that was blocked in your country. My grandfather...
He blocked telepathically. Alright, people, that was Why There Are No Bridges in East London by the channel Jay Foreman. This channel is great as always, and that was surprising. I thought there's no river there, but obviously Thames is there, and it's really surprising thing how there is no bridges there. London basically was one of the biggest power ever, and it was that for a long time. So nobody built bridges there because of obviously reasons. Now nobody's building bridges there because obviously people are being pissed off, and then obviously now Parliament is not just going to left and right pass things. There's going to be resistance there as well. So unless they basically build 2-3 bridges for cars, yeah, it's not going to happen. Car people are not going to get pissed off, and like he said, when the bridges close down, people actually use bicycles more, which is obviously a good thing all around. I know obviously Jeremy Clarkson bitches about this a lot, so I know that in England, London, basically, the bicycling thing is just rising in past 1 or 2 decades. So yeah. Right, if you like my content, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.